After rewriting the opening part of the script multiple times over 50 hours of play, I've settled on Greedfall: The Dying World as more greedful for fans of the original, just with a major caveat that can make or break the experience. It functions as a prequel with an ambitious scope, an even larger cast of interesting characters, more diverse regions to explore, and it is often beautiful and atmospheric. However, it comes with a tweaked combat system and a lack of polish reflecting the troubled development period. I should also admit up front that I have a soft spot for the French developer, going all the way back to 2012's of Orcs and Men, despite some recurring flaws. I find Spider's varied and gritty game worlds novel. The weird and awkward characters are more interesting than your typical fantasy or sci-fi cast, and they always strive to offer multiple quest solutions and outcomes despite a limited budget. Those aforementioned flaws are dubious level design with a fondness for maze-like maps, something they've mostly resolved, and a combat system that struggles to find a balance between modern action RPGs and older tactical CRPGs. In that regard, I feel they've gone backwards, to the detriment. For context, 2019's Greedfall was a critical and commercial success for Spiders and felt like a homage to Xbox 360-era BioWare, while they were off trying to salvage the doomed anthem. There was a strong focus on player choice, frequent talent checks, unique companion interactions, and diverse outcomes, harkening back to the Mass Effect trilogy and the first two Dragon Age games. As Greedfall: The Dying World still does more right than wrong, I want to start with the positives. You now play as a Tier-Fridian youth on the cusp of completing their training to become a Donegada. Think lawkeeper tasked with preserving the balance between people and nature. After a lengthy prologue reintroduces the setting and core mechanics, the party is ambushed, captured and taken to the mainland of Gascon by members of the Bridge Alliance, a faction that represents classic colonial savagery hidden behind the excuse of progress. You swiftly escape the capital of Alima and begin gathering a diverse crew representing all the major factions as you explore the cities and countryside of the Bridge Alliance territories, the North Islands, Congregation Lands, and Tier-Fridi. Your primary goal is to build a coalition against imperialist plotters that aim to both seize power on the continent and decimate the native population of Tier-Fridi. The setup is an improvement over the first game, which relied on establishing a link between the mainland protagonist and the island so they could still do the colonist goes native and becomes a messiah spiel. In Greedfall: The Dying World, your protagonist gets to experience a mix of overt discrimination and condescending fascination from faction leaders and individuals on the continent. Interactions are varied given the needs of the plot or your party composition, but I was impressed at how most factions I courted for support still acted and spoke in a manner that hinted at their underlying self-interest. Greedfall: The Dying World can be played in isolation, but it features key events that transition into the original game without breaking continuity, and it serves to highlight how untrustworthy the colonial powers are unless it suits their immediate needs. When it comes to questing and role-playing, Spiders once again ensures that choice is present in every quest, even if the gameplay loop and narrative beats might be familiar to RPG veterans. Once you acquire a ship, you explore large and interconnected zones, with a handful of key locations you return to repeatedly, and loot chests off the beaten path. You still talk to dozens of NPCs, potentially battle them, recover and deliver items, solve simple environmental puzzles, and use a combination of tracking and talent checks to investigate. You defeat common bandits, wild animals, and rare named enemies to gain extra XP, towards improving attributes, skills, and talents. You loot gear of varied quality and tiers for incremental upgrades, and you harvest an inordinate amount of material for crafting and alchemy systems. The foundations may feel commonplace these days, but Greedfall: The Dying World hooks you once you realize every quest or interaction has multiple outcomes based on your dialogue choices, talent checks, and who you have with you in your party, the order you've tackled quest objectives, and the outcome of previous quests, major or minor. It's not always apparent in the opening hours or during a first playthrough, but there is a level of complexity we simply don't see in modern and big-budget RPGs due to prohibitive development costs. Every quest was an opportunity to affect the ending, faction relations, and your companion's fates. There are a core sequence of story quests and multi-stage companion quests to work through, but how you reach the conclusions of those quests feels flexible and fluid, even if not quite to the level of Piranha Bytes games like Gothic or Elix 2. Taking a companion linked to the region you're exploring typically offers unique dialogue options and bonus world-building banter. Using diplomacy checks or bribery guards can offer a way to avoid combat, or potentially infuriate them. The rudimentary but effective stealth and disguise system, coupled with mechanical checks for locks,
can get you in and out of areas with key items and evidence with minimal combat. Just exploring thoroughly yields the benefits like additional clues, optional items, and new dialogue prompts as a result. My only critique is that the talent checks are now percentage chance based rather than hard limits, so save scumming for the best outcome is tempting. The quest system in Greedfall: The Dying World is not perfect, however, and serves to highlight an overall lack of polish. There is the odd dialogue inconsistency, usually around names, gender, or the order of events. There might be lingering objective markers on the maps until the quest is fully resolved, and there can be fade-to-black scenes or sudden location jumps that make some quests feel rushed. There's an obvious trade-off between complexity and spectacle, with a handful of notable cutscenes reserved for key moments, and the bulk of your adventure feeling surprisingly low-key. For me, it was the right choice, but Greedfall: The Dying World can feel like an adventure in which you work tirelessly in the background to ensure things don't get worse than they already are. All of which brings me to the combat. In 2019, Greedfall offered real-time combat. Think timed strikes, pistol shots, dodges, and parries, but you could bring up a tactical layer to pause the game, trigger companion abilities, and direct them at specific targets. On the default difficulty, your companions could hold their own so you could focus on exploration and role-playing. In contrast, Greedfall: The Dying World shifts to pure real-time with pause combat, and it really hurts the experience if you go in with expectations from the first game. I don't recall any outcry about the complexity of combat in the first game, so shifting to a more niche system is an odd choice. There is a hybrid toggle that allows your companions to mostly manage themselves, but it feels like an afterthought. More problematic is that regardless of your setting, the combat now lacks impact as it's a pure numbers game. By default, battles are tough, tactical, and tedious. You need to consider positioning and environmental hazards, use of skills to break armor and magical barriers, and you need to synergize skills with player blessings and enemy curses to inflict meaningful damage. I don't doubt there's a subset of fans happy with this change, but my advice, as primarily a console player these days, would be to select custom difficulty, crank up party damage output to 200%, then scale up enemy damage output to your tastes. This resulted in an experience that was challenging enough that I frequently used the real-time with pause function to assess the situation, but more importantly, it massively improved the pacing, so I could get on with the better bits. There is more I could say about the expanded combat depth that I really bothered to explore, but honestly, combat was not a highlight in Greedfall, and it was never the reason I was interested in this prequel-sequel. It was the novel setting, the world building, the diverse cast, the prospect of constant quest choices, and the thrill of watching varied outcomes. All elements that Greedfall: The Dying World still gets right. As such, there is still a lot to enjoy for fans of the first game, but I can't understand why the game was made less accessible by shifting to a more niche combat system. If you've got this far, please consider giving the video a like and maybe subscribing to our channel as it helps us grow.